Welcome to this training session on supplier and raw material approvals. 3iVerify is a highly comprehensive solution for managing all aspects of food safety. Good food safety systems start with good supplier and raw material approvals. On screen in front of you, you can see a range of different modules, but today we're going to concentrate on supplier, questionnaires, corrective actions, and tasks. But first, before we get to that, we're going to look at the admin area and look at how we design questionnaires in the system, specifically supplier approval questionnaires and material questionnaires. Administrators can click on the admin icon and get access to the admin menu. And in here, we're going to look today at the forms designer. Within the forms designer, we can design any type of form which may be used as a questionnaire, which is designed to be sent to a supplier, or it may be used as a form for capturing data, for example, a GMP audit. So let's look at a supplier approval questionnaire in the system. You can see I have many different examples here. We're going to look at the design of this supplier approval for food. The first point to note is that you can add forms within the system, and you can edit their properties once they're added into the system. Clicking on Edit Form allows me to change the category of the form. So the form may be a supplier approval form, it may be a raw material approval form, or it may be an internal form for auditing or capturing HACCP or quality data on the shop floor. You can also select an email template which goes out with this particular questionnaire, and you can create custom email templates for specific topics that you want to be used. Each questionnaire in the system can be set with a expiry days in months, so 12 months, 24 months, etc., according to your needs. And what this does is once a questionnaire has been approved, the date of approval plus 12 months, 24 months, etc. is added on to create the expiry date of that questionnaire. A range of other options are on this screen as well. We're not going to go into them in this session, but the main thing that we want to understand is the master approval status, which we'll look at later. And this checkbox is switched on for this supplier approval to change the master approval status of the supplier whenever this questionnaire is approved. So that concludes the form properties part. Let's close this and go look at the sections of this particular questionnaire. So for supplier approval food, we have a number of different sections in the questionnaire. This is all pretty self-explanatory and logical. The first section in this case is the scope. This scoping section will determine, according to the answers provided by the supplier, which of these other sections will be shown in the questionnaire that they receive. For example, if the supplier indicates that they have SEDEX membership, then we may not require them to complete the ethical trading section. Otherwise, we want them to tell us about their ethical trading policies and procedures. If the site is GFSI certified, then we would only show the certification site and not show the general pest control, supplier processes, etc., because we are going to rely on the GFSI certification. And then finally, we've got a sign-off section here. The key thing about each of these sections is that each section has, again, got some properties which allow us to change the name of the section, the order in which it appears in the left menu in the supplier questionnaire, and also that we can include help links to explain things about the questionnaire. We can add specified approvers, and each section we can set to be a sign-off section. We can set it to print on a new page when the PDF of the approval is completed. We can set the section to be a landscape when it's printed. We can set it to not be shown on the PDF, and we can hide the section for the supplier. So in other words, This would be an internal section, which might be our assessment of the supplier, for example, based on the information they've given us. And this is a special option here, Run Live Data Update, when we want to immediately update the data in the live tables in the system rather than wait for the approval of the questionnaire. Also over here, we've got some additional section configuration options. These will display certain things in that section, like an audit summary. Perhaps we don't want the supplier to be importing data into that section from another questionnaire. We have show dynamic form, conditional independency, and these are used with the scope. And this section is a show dynamic form because we're going to use this section to determine the dependent sections elsewhere. As an example of this, if we go and look at the ethical trading section, properties, what we can see here is this is a conditional section, and the table value, we are not members of SEDEX, is the value that we're going to assess for whether this section is shown or not. For example, if the supplier selects yes, we are not members of SEDEX, then this section will be shown. So that's how the conditional section aspects work. You can also note down here, we have a specified approver in this particular case, which can be edited, and you can add other approvers into the questionnaire to make them specified approvers. Okay, let's move on from the section properties of the questionnaire and go look at how these are designed. We're not going to spend too much time on this. It's really for background information at this stage. So we select the section that we want to look at or work with, and we click next, and this will bring up the section designer. And what this allows us to do is to add in various controls. This one is a heading control. You can see the properties over here. This is a label control here. And again, you can see its properties. So we've got the caption name, and then we've got the label content. But this control is actually quite a powerful control because it allows us to embed documents, to make this control an accordion, which expands and contracts on screen according to what we want to display. It also allows us to do full HTML editing, which allows us to embed media, images, and formatting in tables, colors, anything that you can do with a web page design, we can do in here using the HTML editor. Underneath this, another example is a question table where we are defining, and again, this is a table control, so we're defining how many columns this table has, whether it is a scored table or not. What kind of table is it? Is it fixed rows or a dynamic table? So fixed rows will give us a list of questions and the columns for answers. Dynamic rows allows us to add new rows dynamically. There are other various settings here which won't go into right now, but each column also then has properties, such as the width of the column on the page in percentage terms, what the kind of control we're going to use. So this is going to be a label, and it's going to show us supplier ethical trading questions. This control here is going to be a drop-down list. So each row in this table will have a yes, no only drop-down list. This column is going to be a text field, and it's going to show the score for this question according to the yes, no answer provided, but it's going to be locked. You can see additional settings here and so on. Supporting information is going to be an optional section where additional information can be provided. And so the rest of the questionnaire allows us to edit this information and change the content according to our needs and what we want to say to the supplier in terms of instructions, what information we want them to upload, and so on. Notice that these fields are special fields. These are set to office use and hidden from supplier. We can also set these to show after approval, so the supplier can see these fields after approval. And these are the assessment fields that we are carrying out our assessment of the information which the supplier has uploaded into the system. Okay, so that's just a little bit of background. So all questionnaires and all forms in the system are designed in this way. And what this means is that we can create any kind of questionnaire or form in the system in any language, and we can capture any kind of information, including images, photographs during audits, for example, and textual number information. And you'll see some of this more in a moment. So let's return to the home menu to continue looking at this example of this supplier questionnaire. So back at the home menu, if I want to send a questionnaire to a particular supplier, bearing in mind this questionnaire could be about anything. It might be supplier approval, it might be raw material approval, I might be wanting information on their supply chain, I might be carrying out a remote audit assessment. We click on the supplier menu, and once in there, we're going to see the suppliers icon. Click into this now, and this will bring up a search facility that allows us to quickly find any supplier we want to work with. For example, you can see here there are many different suppliers in this list, and these are the suppliers for this particular site. If I wanted to see the suppliers for a different site, which I've got privileges to, I can select that site, and it will load the list of suppliers for that particular site. So using this approach, we can segment the suppliers by site, but what we can also do is we can set these suppliers to being global suppliers, which are available to all sites. So let's just go and look at one particular supplier here, and the supplier I've chosen here is AAK. What you'll notice is that we have a number of different tabs in the system here. And the first one is the details of the supplier and the site, the primary site that this supplier is supplying to. Underneath that, we've got the supplier details. Supplier group is optional, so if you want to, for reporting purposes, you can add supplier groups here and associate the supplier with that group. You can also add and edit supplier types. These add, edit, and delete icons will only be available for administrator privileged users. Down here, you can see the approval status of this supplier. And if you change this, you're going to be asked for a reason for change. For example, I would need to enter in the reason for change here. Underneath this, we have various fields which are important for the supplier. There may be a registration number, maybe a DUNS number that's required. We have the supplier site name, and you may also have an SAP code or a third-party identifier that you want to put in the system for integration purposes here. We then have the usual address, postcode, and country details, and an optional link for their website as well. On the right-hand side, we have a list of materials that we are purchasing from this supplier and a list of any third-party manufacturers who are the actual co-manufacturer of that material. Notice to the right of the material, we have an approval status. And again, if you change this, you need to put in a reason. Any reason added can be found in the change history icon to the right of the approval status. And these are the approval status which is updated when a questionnaire is set to change master approval status. So if it's a supplier questionnaire, it will change the supplier approval status. In other words, if the questionnaire is approved, it will approve it. If it's pending, it will be pending. And if the questionnaire is unapproved for some reason, it will be set to unapproved. And it's the same here for material questionnaires when we send those as well. Indeed, for manufacturer questionnaires, the same process applies where a manufacturer is involved in a questionnaire which has been sent out and has been approved or otherwise. So moving on to the next stage, this is very important, and that's the contacts at the supplier. Of course, we need someone to send questionnaires to, so the technical contact is the most important contact in here. And you can see we have an email address and a password associated with that technical contact. We also have the commercial contact and emergency contact, but the only one which is mandatory for the supplier is the technical contact. In fact, when the questionnaire is sent to the supplier, we ask them for the commercial and emergency contact. In every questionnaire that goes out, and this is a good way to get additional information from the supplier about these contacts. The other important person in the Contact tab is the in-house account manager. So this is a list of people at this site who are managing the supplier approval and raw material approval processes. So moving on to the Approvals tab, this is where we initiate the sending of a supplier approval questionnaire. Each of the questionnaires designed in the system are now in this list here. The one we looked at a moment ago was the supplier approval food. So we simply select this. We can have these automatically set to auto send on expiry. You may, in some circumstances, not want to send an email right away because you want to pre-complete something in the questionnaire and then have the supplier respond to that. And where there is a third-party manufacturer involved, it may be the manufacturer you wish to approve, not the supplier. For example, with an agent and broker who's using a third-party manufacturer. In this case, the supplier will be sent the supplier approval questionnaire, but they will be notified that they can forward the questionnaire on to the manufacturer for completion. For now, I'm just going to switch these parts off. So having selected the questionnaire, you'll notice that the assigned user for this questionnaire is defaulting to me as the logged in user. You can, of course, change that to another questionnaire approver in the system, and they will be assigned the task of reviewing and approving this questionnaire when the supplier returns it. The other point about assigned users is that any email communication, for example, reminders of the need to complete the questionnaire to the supplier, are sent with the details of this person in the footer of that email. So whoever is the assigned user, their signature, email signature, will go on to the email which is sent to each individual user. So moving forward with this, we simply need to click Send Questionnaire, and the technical contact will now receive a questionnaire, and this will be logged in the system with a unique reference number below. So here you can see the details sent today, 13th October 2022. We can see the questionnaire has not been opened, and by default, it's been set with a 20-day deadline. You can change this at any time to another date if the supplier says they need more time, for example. But this is useful to give you a visual indication on screen where you have overdue questionnaires, etc. Looking down the rest of this grid, you can see some of these questionnaires have been completed, so these have been approved and completed. Some are approaching their deadline, so we've got the amber color here, 3 days to go, and the one which has been completed here has got an expiry date here, and you have various options on this menu around how to manage the questionnaires. So we can archive, we can view the PDF, we could recreate the PDF, we can look at the PDF history, we could unapprove this questionnaire and resend it to the supplier again for correcting some issue or mistake. And we also have the option to send a customized PDF of the information from this questionnaire to a customer. So this enables us to modify the information and send to a particular customer the questionnaire with all sections or some sections omitted in order to preserve confidentiality. We can hide the supplier details, we can hide the manufacturer details, commercial and technical contacts we can replace with another person. And this is very useful for agents and brokers who want to make sure that they are preserving the confidentiality within their own supply chain and can still provide information to their customer. Okay, let's move on to the actual questionnaire itself. So we sent a supplier approval questionnaire here. And what I'm also going to do, just for the purposes of this training session, is I'm going to discuss certification management and also materials management. So in order to make this efficient, I'm going to send a certification request, and I'm also going to send a material approval questionnaire so we can look at all of this through the eyes of the supplier in a moment. So in certification, we have two tabs when we get into the supplier certification tab. We have the applicable certification, which allows us to check off the list of certification which we want to receive from the supplier. In this example, there are a lot of certification boxes checked. Typically, it's not going to be as many as this. For the purposes of this demonstration, we've checked quite a few. But you would simply check the box that you want and click Save Assurance. And then on the Certification tab, you can then select the assurance scheme that you want to request. Notice that we can add to the list things like the audit report and other information if we want to gather that information in this way. So we have automated certification switched on, which means we're going to send an electronic link to the supplier for this particular assurance information. It's got an assigned user, which will be used for the communication and notifications process. Again, it's got auto send on expiry. So once the certificate is uploaded into the system and the expiry date is set, it will automatically send a new request when that date is on the horizon. So we're just going to send this one, and we can now see what we've sent this BRC Global Standard for Agents and Brokers Audit Report request on the 13th of October. It's not been opened. It's not set to auto send. It's got a 20-day deadline and it's not been checked, so we'll check it later. Similarly, on the materials section, we have the ability to select a material and then select the questionnaire we want to send, which in this case is the material specification questionnaire. Same options as before, auto send and expiry, don't send email, and select a manufacturer. For simplicity, I'll just click send questionnaire. So again, the supplier will be sent an email with these details in there. And one thing that's worth noticing is that you can copy questionnaire requests to people who are on the CC list, and you set up contacts on your CC list in the contacts area by adding additional contacts and then clicking the Add to CC button. That then makes these people available inside the CC list. So before I move away from the material assessment questionnaire side of things, just one word about documents here. In this area, any documents which are uploaded as part of the questionnaire process or by you are automatically stored in here in the system. And you can do bulk uploads, which means that when you're first getting started with the system, you can upload all of the documents you have from that supplier or about that material straight into here and then begin classifying them quickly and easily. But that is a subject for another training session. Okay, so let's go log in as the supplier and see what they have received. So you can see that the supplier has got their own portal here where they have a list of their questionnaires. They have a list of certification requests. They can update their details. There's a little dashboard area where they can see how many materials they have to work on, etc. And then we have an academy icon here, which takes them through to the help and support area. When they click on their email, however, they'll be taken straight to their questionnaire. But the key thing is that the supplier's got a list of all the questionnaires which they've ever been sent. And here are the two which have just been sent today, the supplier approval food and the material approval questionnaire. It will give them a unique reference number. They can see what material it's related to. They can see the deadline, and they can also open the questionnaire either here or by simply clicking on the questionnaire. So the questionnaire will now open in a new tab. And this is the design we were looking at earlier on. So the supplier would simply complete their details here, click next, and then update their technical contacts. If they change the email address here, because this is going to be used in login, then they will receive an email with their new password to the new email address. Clicking next, we confirm the details and move on to the next section. This is an example of a scoping section. So notice that the questionnaire at this point only has an introduction, corrective actions, a sign off, and a feedback section here. If the supplier indicates that the site is GFSI certified in this particular example, and that they're not members of SEDEX, and perhaps that they're not willing to share their latest BRC report, when they click next, this information is going to be processed in order to decide which sections to load in the questionnaire. So because they said they are GFSI certified, they have a certification section. But because they said they were not willing to share their BRC report, we have asked them for general pest control, supplier processes, recall plan, and quality procedures. And because they said they're not members of SEDEX, we added in the ethical trading section. So using this approach helps us minimize the amount of information that we require from a supplier, and it is highly customizable to take account of lots of different situations, so we can make life easier for both you and for the supplier. So the first section here is a introduction section, just with some information here, and this one doesn't capture any data as such, so we just click next section. Here is the certification section where they can upload their GFSI certification, and by simply entering their certification number, etc., their expiry date, and so on, and a copy of the actual certificate. I'm just going to load this as an example. Any other certification you can add down here. If you remember before, we spoke about dynamic tables. These are dynamic tables because we have an add new row button here, and this is set in the admin area when we're designing the form. There is a BLC certificate already in, however, if they've missed it, they may upload a document here. So these two documents are now instantly uploaded into the documents area of the supplier. If we revert to the documents tab for that supplier and just refresh this, you'll see that both of these documents are now here, and we can go and view these documents and classify them, etc. So there is the document, and we can rename it, set its expiry date, and so on. So that's just a little example of a dynamic table in the system. Bearing in mind that everything you see here is designed in the form designer. You also have the ability to set up your own question tables and question lists. So in this case, we have some food safety questions which are scored, and we're only showing the scored column here by way of an example for the purposes of this demonstration. Questions can have tooltips there and other languages, for example, and you can see how this is adding up the score and giving us a percentage score for this particular subsection of questions within this section. So the concept is pretty straightforward. We've got yes, no compliance type questions in this example, and the supplier would answer all of the questions, upload any documents that we want. Again, this is a dynamic table, but we can easily implement a fixed row table that says upload your food safety policy, upload your quality policy, and upload your glass and hard brittle plastic policy. So when the user has completed this section, they click next and the questionnaire is validated with a green tick. If they click next and don't save anything, what will happen is any information they've entered will be saved, but we'll have a red mark against that section, indicating that they need to return and complete this before the supplier can submit the questionnaire back for approval. Once all of the sections have been completed, we can see a green check mark against each of the sections. This section here is the corrective actions section. In this example, there is nothing in this section at this point, so the supplier can be instructed to simply skip this section by clicking next at the bottom of the page. This section may come into play later if we need to raise a corrective action and resend the questionnaire to the supplier so they can record the details of their corrective action in here. Clicking next will take us to the sign-off section, and the system will validate whether all of the sections have been completed or not. If they're not completed, a message will be displayed and the submit for approval button will be disabled. In this example, we're required to complete fields here, and then we click submit for approval. Notice that the email address of the user submitting is displayed here, and there is a notification that they agree to an electronically signed record of this submission, which is why the email address is there. So this submission will be stored against that email address for this supplier user, and once submitted, each section in the questionnaire is now locked. The reason for this is that we don't want the supplier to be changing any information while we are working on approving that information. We will have the opportunity to unlock and resend the questionnaire with its unlocked section back to the supplier for further work or further information if required. On our side of the system, if we now come back to approvals, you can see that this questionnaire 1365 is now pending approval. Email notification has been sent for this. We can also view this in the questionnaires list screen, which is available from the home menu. And again, you can see here 1365 supplier approval and it's pending approval. Notice that from here you can change the deadline. You can also change the assigned user to another person to pick this work up and complete the approval. On the right menu, you can see we have three options: approve questionnaire, remind approver, and unlock questionnaire. Approve questionnaire will simply open the questionnaire for approval. Remind approver will send email reminders to specified approvers for the sections within the questionnaire which have not yet been approved. And unlock questionnaire will unlock the entire questionnaire so the supplier can start at the beginning and work through everything from scratch. It will, however, retain the data that they entered previously. Okay, so let's go and look at the questionnaire. The first point to notice is that on the left-hand side, we can see that each section is pending approval. So this is where we need to carry out our approval processes. We can also see that some of the sections are coloured with a golden colour. This means that these sections have a specified approver. So in terms of the approval process, we can go straight to the certification section, and the information which the supplier has uploaded is all available here, but it's all read-only because we don't want to edit information the supplier has uploaded for data integrity purposes. So the scheme is here, the certificate is here also, and during the assessment you can drill into that certificate and check it. Below this we have the additional information uploaded, and here are our official use fields which are not visible to the supplier. In this example, any notes and observations can be made in this section here. So we click approve and we move on to the next section. And once we've done that, there is a green check mark against the certification section. Next, we have the general section with all of the questions which were answered, including the scoring. Notice that because I'm an administrator, I can actually edit these questions in the admin area straight from here. And clicking on this will take me to those questions for maintaining the questions in the system. For example, if there is a question that has a typo, or we want to add in some foreign language guidance notes, then we can do that straight from there. So moving down, we would assess the questionnaire. And in this particular case, in the official use only, we have a number of risk assessments that we might want to carry out. So for example, we may want to look at food safety and run a risk matrix on this, which is going to give us a risk rating, for example. We can enter in a justification, and the management action from that risk matrix will be shown here based on the risk band which this risk rating falls into. Further down from here is another example of a risk assessment that may be done against a particular product, raw material, or some other aspect that we're going to be interested in. And again, this could be a food safety side of things here. The justification can be entered, and underneath this we have some checkboxes which again are office use fields, and we can enter in any notes and observations. You'll note here that the specified approver is displayed here next to the approve button, just in case someone comes along and decides they want to approve this, they know that it's this person's responsibility. And this could be a list of people, not just one. So we'll click approve here and move to the next section. We get a green check mark, and we repeat this process all the way through. Because this is a scored assessment, one of the special sections we mentioned earlier in the process of designing the supplier approval questionnaire was the score summary section. So when the score summary section checkbox is selected for a particular section, this is what we will see. So each of these sections has a question table which is configured as a scored question set, and the results from each section is now displayed here, along with the maximum score, the actual score, the percentage score, and whether the supplier passed for each of these areas. This is a very useful way to automate the supplier assessment process, but also the supplier audit process. If corrective actions are raised, they're going to be shown in this particular section of the questionnaire. Let's look at an example of raising a corrective action. If I move to Supplier Processes, on the right-hand side, you'll see there is a tab called Actions. I can open this tab and click Add Actions. And I can also view any previous corrective actions which have been raised against this supplier, which might give me more insight into their performance over time. But for now, for the example, I'm going to add action. And here I'm going to raise a corrective action or maybe a supplier non-conformity. There is a set workflow configured in this example of the system for corrective action for supplier. That will result in automated tasks being raised and assigned to certain people. And in this case, we could say the supplier approval program is not effective, and we could give some specific details on the problem. Each action will require an owner and an assigned user, so you could assign this to someone else in the team. We also need to select an action category for reporting purposes, and we select an action source, which may be observation, audit, or some other source that you can add into the system. So we are going to set a priority, and we're going to set a due date. So the supplier is going to be reminded, and you're going to be reminded about this action as well. And then it's automatically selected the supplier who is affected here, and we can click Add Action. So this will add the action into the system, and it's recorded here against this questionnaire. And we can also see that the corrective action is also in the Supplier Actions tab. Closing this and returning to the Corrective Actions tab, we can now see that the corrective action is logged here and everything is read-only. And at this point, I may want to unlock this section because in a pending state, it's locked for the supplier. And how I do this is by clicking the Add Feedback Unlock Section button. So you can set the feedback response user, which may be you or it may be someone else who's working on this. And you can say in here, please complete the corrective action and resubmit for approval. In this particular case, we click Unlock Section. It's important to do that. Otherwise, the supplier may receive the feedback, but will not be able to upload any information in the system. If you've got multiple feedback that you want to send, you may not want to send the email until the very final feedback. So when they log in, they'll see all of the feedback anyway. Let's click Save Changes. This meant that this feedback has now been added onto the bottom of the corrective action section. If we transfer over to the supplier view of things and go to the corrective action section, when they log in now, they're going to see a green padlock, which means this section is unlocked for data entry. So notice that there is an outstanding feedback request here. The supplier would be required to enter their response, upload any corrective action documentation, and then mark in completed and click reply. Once the corrective action has been submitted, the green check mark is shown here, which indicates that the system has validated all mandatory information has been uploaded. And now we can complete the sign-off section. Clicking submit for approval will once again lock the entire questionnaire, and an email will be received by the assigned user, so they are notified that they can now proceed with approving the questionnaire. The assigned user then returns to the section, and any remaining pending sections are displayed, and the details can be viewed and approved. And finally, the questionnaire approver can sign off the questionnaire by clicking the Approve button and entering their password. This process will now make live in the database all of the information which has been captured, and it will also create two PDF documents. The first document is for your supplier approval records and will be branded with your logo and look like this. Each document will have exactly the same layout and form and design as the sections in the form designer which you have designed in terms of those settings. There will be hyperlinks to any documents which have been uploaded. So if you open this document, you'll be able to access all of the underlying information like certification, audit reports, certificates of analysis, etc. All of the questions, including their score, are shown here, and all of the office use assessment information which you have entered is shown here. On the supplier side, according to the design of the questionnaire, these are not shown. So everything is here for your supplier approval as a single document with all of the sign-off, including all of the feedback and the corrective actions entered into the system. On the supplier side, they also will receive a document which only has the information which you have specified they should have. If we open up their PDF, what we can see is there are no office use assessment fields in here. It's only the information which the supplier as uploaded into the system. Of course, we can show the assessment information after approval, or we can completely hide it from the supplier if needed. So that concludes this short training session on supplier approval questionnaires. And in other training sessions, we will look at certification management and also material approval questionnaires in more detail.